All right. Welcome, and thank you for joining Your Career Strategy and this amazing panel of diverse mothers who have gathered here to share aspects of their life stories at the intersection of motherhood and their professional career journeys. At YCS, we've had the pleasure of supporting many parents in the midst of career transition. And today you're going to get to hear from a panel of our colleagues, clients, and friends who hold the ever important title of mom. My name is Eli Beaumont. I am your moderator today and the head coach of Your Career Strategy. Very excited to be here and very excited to have the support of this amazing panel of women. So what I'm going to do is I'll give each panelist about a minute and a half to introduce themselves with their name, location, where are you on your journey as a mother, and what has been your most significant career transition to date. Okay, I'll call out just to make it easy. We'll start with you, Beanie.
Okay, thanks, Eli. Hi, my name is Beanie Brady. I am based in Boulder, Colorado. I am the very proud mom of a 17 and 19-year-old, two girls. I have had a nonlinear career trajectory spanning the tech sector, nonprofit, and legal sectors. My career trajectory has also included 2 stints out of the paid workforce, including a year living abroad with my kids when they were in late elementary school in a country where I didn't speak the language. My most difficult transition, I think this is a hard one because I've had several transitions. The one I think of as the most difficult is when my kids were in preschool and I found a job that was part-time during preschool hours and literally paid as much as the preschool tuition was. Those were my criteria for finding a job. And then this most recent transition about 3.5 years ago back into the tech sector where I did not know a Slack from a Gmail. And so just kind of onboarding with tech was one of the biggest challenges. And thanks for having us here, Eli.
Yeah, no doubt. Thank you, Beanie. That was a great intro. Eva.
Thanks, Eli, and thanks for having me. My name is Eva Bloom. I'm in Athens, Ohio, in the rolling hills of Southeast Ohio. I am a mother of a 20-month-old daughter. Her name is Sophia. I had the great adventure of being pregnant during the pandemic and having my first child in the pandemic world. And then during that time, also leaving a job that I had had for about 14 years and transitioning into a new industry. So started working for a credit union pretty shortly after college, ended up finding my way through multiple roles in that organization and finding a real love of communications. I have a slightly non-traditional background in playwriting and live in a very small town and not New York, where you really can't get a job working in the theater in Athens, Ohio. So found my way into different roles to make a living, and then found that I really enjoyed helping people understand the benefits of products and services that different organizations have offered, and also that I really appreciate working for companies with a social purpose. So I doubled down on that and left a career in a credit union to work for a community action agency that does work in 5 different divisions. Primarily, our biggest division is our food and nutrition division, and that is what I end up spending most of my time on. So I made that transition when Sophia was just a year old, and promised myself I wouldn't get a new job and a new baby in the same year. So I think I started my job actually 2 days before her first birthday. So I got myself a little slack on there. And that has been my biggest career transition, and the only other job that I've had in my real professional life. So it's definitely been interesting and very exciting adventure. And I'm very excited to be here with you guys tonight.
No doubt. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. Rainbow, how about you?
Well, hi, everyone. I am Rainbow Wong, calling in from Portland, Oregon. I am a mother to an 8-month-old baby girl named Avi. The most significant transition to date has definitely been the past 3 years. I moved out of New York in 2019, at the end of 2019, into Portland. And so I left the traditional banking sector and am now applying my analytical skills in PGE, which is the Portland utility company. When I started interviewing for this role, I was not pregnant. And when I accepted the role, I was pregnant. So it's been a really interesting transition to really fast forward on the conversation about my maternity leave and how to make that transition back into the workforce in a pretty short amount of time because of maternity leave versus employee tenure. So I'm happy to talk about more about that as we move on in our panel. But I'm really happy to be here, and I'm really glad that Eli is the person who really supported me through this journey.
You're welcome, and it's been an honor. Sharon, if you would.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sharon LaRue McClung, and I am based in Brooklyn. There are no rolling hills, but there was some connection there with what you're saying, Eva. I'm here in Brooklyn, and where I am on my parenting journey. And I think I can make this joke right now. I always say I have 4 children. I have my daughter who's 7, my son who's 16, and my husband, who makes numbers 3 and 4. He's heard that 1,000 times, so there's no cats out of that bag. So that is where I am on my parenting journey, with lots of humor and love. And I would say that my most significant career transition was transitioning from a job that I had had for 15 years to anything else. When I started that job, there was no LinkedIn. Resumes were on paper, and we used to pay attention to the color and how they felt. So let's just say I got thrown into the deep end of the pool. I didn't know what an applicant tracking anything was. And I had to learn really quickly. And I'm very thankful to several of you on this call who were supportive of me in that. But that was a huge change. I had to learn about tools that I didn't know. But really importantly, I had to learn about what my value was. It's so easy when you stay in one place not to be in touch with that, because you don't have to articulate that. Thanks to Satya and Beanie and Eli for helping me find those words of how I could articulate that and how I wound up here.
Thank you so much, Sharon. And last but not least, Satya.
Thank you, Eli. So excited to be here. So my name is Satya Chetta. I'm based also in Brooklyn. Actually, Sharon and I can walk to each other's places. We are neighbors. I'm a mom to a 15-year-old teenager, which I'll say has been a very interesting time of my parenting journey, but always fun. I'll share that I'm also a co-parenting my teenager. So I navigated a divorce about 6.5 years ago. Can definitely speak to that as well. And I've actually managed many different career transitions throughout my entire lifetime, pre-child and after kid. I've had many different places where I've worked, like different industries. So I worked in nonprofit, I've worked in education, both like in high school education and college education. I worked in startups, like tiny startups, and I've worked in large tech companies. I've also navigated many different roles. I've worked as a therapist, I've been a high school teacher, I've been a college counselor, I've been a coach, and I've most recently, I work in the learning and development space, where I'm creating trainings and learnings for people and employees. So that's a little bit about me. So I have a lot definitely to share today. I'm really excited to be part of this really great panel of talented moms.
Heck yes. Heck yes. Round of applause to all of you. So happy to have you here. What I want to do is first remind the audience that we were going to have a Q&A a bit later. You can comment in if you're on LinkedIn or on YouTube in the comments. We'll see those comments and we'll pose those questions to the audience here. At first things first, though, we're going to do a round of questions here with our panelists. And if you're all okay with it, I'll leave it up to you to maybe raise your hand like this if you want to answer and go first. Okay? And not everyone needs to answer every question if you don't want to. All right. So the first question is, how has your relationship with your career evolved since becoming a mother? It could be around boundaries and priorities. It could be hacks or things that you've created to create more time. So, how has your relationship with your career evolved since becoming a mother? Who would like to go first? Eva.
I'll jump right in. I feel that my relationship with my career and my relationship with parenting has really been shaped by the larger situation that I have been living in, which is I've done both of these things during the pandemic. And that has allowed me and also made me realize the need for flexibility. I am someone who likes to prove my worth every day by getting in early or staying late. And if you're not going into an office, sometimes that doesn't matter because nobody knows when you signed on or when you logged off. So that's one of the things that I've had to adjust in terms of the way that I relate to my employer, is that I can let go of that idea that I have to be, the first one in the office and I need to leave after everyone is already gone. And that flexibility and also prioritizing my family and my self-care, which I know probably all the moms out there are like, what's self-care? Like, I don't remember what that is anymore, but it's still really important to get as much of that as you can. And so I feel that what happened during the pandemic really created the demand for flexibility and workers being able to pick up your stuff and go work from home or work wherever you can, while we were in some of those more scary lockdown days. And then I have built upon that as I've become a mother and known that flexibility is something that's really important to me and my ability to perform my best and be able to kind of integrate to some degree my responsibilities as a parent as well as my responsibilities as a professional. And that has been really helpful for me, and something that I never really knew would be possible to the degree that it currently is for me today.
The pandemic shifted quite a bit here in terms of flexibility and really creating that space for us to explore what it looks like to be at home with our kids and then work at the same time. Did that spark anything for anyone else? Would anyone else like to share how their relationship with their careers evolved since becoming a mom? Sharon?
Oh, totally, Eva. Yes, big sparks. And I think the biggest evolution, because I think they're still evolving going on, I think, is that my career is being a parent. I've always been a go-getter. I dance with a professional ballet company, a professional actor. I was national champion in speech and debate. Like, I was always wanted to go for the superlative and a title, and felt that my worth was all wrapped up in that title. I am a insert adjective here, insert title here, right? And what really, I felt it before, but in the pandemic, it was all of a sudden no choice, right? And I realized that I am me first, and then I put on these other hats, like literally as I ran around our apartment, putting on the plumbing hat and the now facilities management hat and the cooking hat and the high school counselor hat and the Zoom fix it, I don't know what a router is hat. That's not my job. My job is my family and being me. And that was something that I'd been afraid to say before. But I found a lot of solace and a lot of power in that. And I kept thinking about being on an airplane, when they're doing the emergency thing and they tell you that you have to put your mask on first so that you can be help to others. And I realized me being right in my home and a role model for my children, that's my oxygen mask. I have to put that on first. And then I will be a super go-getter at work. Then I will be the role model as well, because that's really where I get my fuel.
Ooh, nice. Love the oxygen mask analogy here. Beanie.
And do you mind, Rainbow, I know you have something to say, but I want to say I have kind of the reverse of what Sharon had, because my kids are 19 and 17. I've got one in college and one actually downstairs preparing her college materials, and she sent me away because I was too loud. And for me, I really dove into parenthood. I had 2 stints out of the paid workforce completely, doing childcare and family elder care. And I really I put that mom hat on and that community member hat on. I was on boards. I ran events for the PTA, all of the unpaid work that makes the world go round. And then as they were heading into high school and didn't really want to listen to a lot of things that I had to say anymore as they became teenagers. And now, especially as I'm watching them launch into their lives, it really became apparent to me that it was time it became apparent, to me that it was time to really refocus on my professional identity. And I just kind of looked around and was like, whoa, what is that? Who am I as a professional? And I was very lucky to work with some amazing people here on this panel as I was transitioning back into a full-fledged professional identity in the paid workforce. And I like to make that distinction because there was so much unpaid work in the parenting space that I loved, and I loved doing all of it. And I think that's really informed how I operate, especially as a coach, with so much empathy for human experience, especially the parenting experience. So I kind of had the reverse of Sharon's, where I was in that mom space, and now I'm like, wait, who am I as a professional, and how do I re-engage with the world as a professional in my career?
Excellent. Rainbow, you
Yeah. I was really nodding my head when Eva spoke about flexibility, and I also think that it's situational. I thought about, how would I have behaved if I was still working in a banking system in New York City versus what life is now when I started this role in a virtual world. I think the flexibility really allowed me to be a mom and be present at home with my daughter. I also learned this about myself, that I have a lot less patience and willingness to do meaningless work. And I am not willing to give 110% if I don't see an end result with the company. So, yeah, I think that's a pretty big breakthrough for me, because I've always been pretty humble and modest about my achievements. But I think that if all of us have gone through the journey of being a mother and, being pregnant for 9 months and then having the baby, we have a lot of skills, and we don't want to be wasting our skills on something that doesn't really make an impact. So yeah, I think it's also helped me set boundaries and verbalize what my priorities are to my family and to my team at work.
That's super powerful. Anyone else want to chime in? Did that spark anything for anyone else?
Yeah,
Oh,
I can share. Definitely, I can really relate to a lot that was said today in this panel related to this topic. And I think for me, I forgot to mention that I did take a career break from like the full-time paid workforce for about 9 years. And during that time, I was prioritizing my family. Like my son was like number one. But I did keep my foot in the door to keep that other part of me engaged and interested and learning, so that it would be easy for me to step back into that world, that full-time work world, when I was ready. And I'm so glad I had that privilege and time to do that, because when I was ready, I was able to do it pretty seamlessly, as opposed to like going through lots of challenges and struggles, which I know was very lucky, because I think a lot of people struggle when they step back into, the work after taking time off. So that was one thing that I was able to do pretty easily. But I'll share that now what I've seen is that since my son is 15 and he doesn't need me as much as he did when he was younger, I'm definitely seeing that I have more time for myself, and to explore, my career, where I want to take it now. And even though I feel like I might have like started my career again over again and started like not where I would have liked to have started it, I'm okay with that because I was able to have that time when my son was young. And so now I'm kind of restarting that whole process and getting to that next stage of where I want to go.
And thank you for sharing. Everyone on a different part of their journey with so many really, really important learnings here. Key theme, don't settle. Keep your foot in the door. Prioritize effectively. Prioritize family and learn from that so that way you can be more effective in the type of work you choose to do and spend your time doing. So let's go to another question here. This is one that our audience members earlier had asked about. So this is typically one of the largest stressors for our female identifying clients. And we'd love to hear from you on how you've approached initial conversations about your pregnancy with a current or soon-to-be employer. So anyone wants to volunteer to tackle this question first?
I could start us off.
Okay.
So I was interviewing for my current role before I was pregnant, and because it's the utility company, it takes forever to actually complete the interviewing process. When I was hired, I was pregnant, and when I joined my new team, I also found out that I didn't really have a manager. So we were sort of a headless team for a while. Because of that, I was definitely stressed out about how to bring this topic up, especially because my team is in charge of a pretty hefty document that needs to be submitted, and it has a very definite timeline. So I approached my the interim boss very early on, and I think fortunately she's also a woman. She is a mother of two, so I think the conversation was pretty seamless, and I approached her very early on. I was just finishing up the first trimester of my pregnancy, and I had already had a pretty good timeline of my schedule and how I would contribute to the team in terms of the document submission. So I think that was really helpful for her to see that I am still very engaged, and I have a schedule in mind so that I'm still meeting the team's expectations. And I think because I brought up that schedule before she did, the reaction from my team was, forget about the timeline, that's always going to be there, but it's so cool that you're pregnant, and we're really happy for you. I don't know how it would have went with if I was still working at a bank, but it was a really refreshing and a really big weight off my shoulder to hear a team that was supportive of this life change.
That's beautiful. For any hiring managers or leaders out there, be supportive of individuals and mothers who are taking that maternity leave and are going through pregnancy. Who else would like to share their experience of approaching these initial conversations about your pregnancy with a current or soon-to-be employer? I know it's been the better part of a decade for some of.
Yeah, I was gonna say, oh. I'll jump in also, since I have done this recently. I was really fortunate in that I had been working for my manager for about 6 years or 7 years by the time we had that conversation, and had a really strong relationship with her. So it did take some of the scariness out of it for me, because I did have a strong relationship with my manager. One of the things that was difficult is that I ended up having to disclose earlier than I had intended. So I was a mature, what do they say in your I think it says mature patient in my file when I was a little older than a lot of folks when they have their first child. Didn't say geriatric. I was really pleased about that. The conversation I wanted to have would have been, 12 or 13 weeks after I had, completed my first trimester, and I was just so sick that I was leaving my computer 2 or 3 times a day in the morning, especially, to get sick. And I was in a meeting, and I was like just barely getting through it. I was like, I'm not going to jump off this meeting. I'm going to stay here. And then the meeting closed, and I went to the bathroom and got back to my desk and said, okay, this is not going to work. I need to talk to my boss like now, so that I can, feel more comfortable taking care of myself and not putting myself through this. So I was very supported in my disclosing that information, which I'm incredibly grateful for. And overall, my experience with the credit union was very supportive of the idea of having, work-life balance. But I do feel like there is this, like, when I was reading, like, okay, how do I do this? What's the time? What are the articles I need to read to be prepared to have this conversation? And they were always tending to encourage you to wait a little bit longer than I needed to. But I did feel a tremendous sense of relief after having shared that information, because it is a really big part of your life. And so I guess what I would take away from that is, if you feel moved to have that conversation earlier than the articles or whatever tell you, that you should trust, your relationship with your employer, and what you need for yourself. And then if you feel like you need to do it earlier to feel supported, or just to feel that weight off your shoulders, that is an experience that was helpful for me to just have that conversation.
Yeah, powerful stuff. I like the level of support that you've all experienced so far. Anyone have the converse of that? Was there any pushback in any of your announcements with former managers, colleagues, teams, etc.?
I'll jump in here because I had a very different just life experience at the time. I was actually in transition and job seeking when I was pregnant with my older daughter, which, egads, I just did the math, was almost 20 years ago. She will be 19 in 2 weeks. And I went on some job interviews, and I mean, Eva, I'm thinking of you because I remember going into a job interview and being sick in the bushes on the way to the job interview, because morning sickness is a thing. And I ended up taking myself out of contention for roles for a number of reasons. One of which is, where I live, and looking at childcare. I was in the social work field at the time, and whatever salary I made would barely cover the amount of the cost of childcare. And I just thought, well, that's crazy. I don't, I'll be working just to keep my kid in childcare all day. And, I'm like, I'm a feminist, I'm lucky to have choices, and I'm grateful to have choices. And so I made the choice to stay at home, to be out of the paid workforce. And then my other daughter came along really quickly thereafter. So I had this beautiful time of being out of the paid workforce. And it was by choice, and very grateful to be able to make that choice. But it was also a choice based on, I didn't want just 6 weeks of mat leave. I have friends who did it, and they were so happy to get back to work, and it just wasn't the choice that was right for me. And I was so concerned with the cost of childcare, and the cost of quality childcare, and my ability to navigate all the things that we talk about with babies and work, that I actually opted out. So that was my choice there.
That's that's a major decision, right? Which brings up a lot of emotions associated with, if I do this, and am I contributing? Am I going to go back to work? And all these thoughts and ideas run through. How do you handle those ideas? Because I know a few of you had taken a bit of a hiatus here to be stay-at-home moms and focus on your family. So what tips do you have in navigating that inner voice that's that can be quite challenging at times, because I'm pretty sure, I mean, one, like, I'm sure I could even take a page out of your book here. Um, Satya.
Yeah, I can share. Yeah, there was a lot of like guilt in the beginning because I was thinking like, am I not now contributing to the household by staying home? But then at the same time, it's like, we see how women's like value, work at home is sometimes not valued in society. And so like, it was kind of like telling my inner voice, don't listen to those, these like types of messages. And so like, it was me like thinking like, how can I feel like I am, adding value to our family. And I was thinking about all the things I was doing outside of sort of like the paid work world. But I'll say that I think that what I see with a lot of moms is that that are choosing to stay home is that you end up taking on more than typical, right? You're not only taking care of like maybe household responsibilities, children, but then there's other things that you might be involved in, like the volunteer work. It could be even part-time freelance work to earn some money or just to keep your foot in the door, just to have some type of, something else outside of just like the home life. So it was like sort of the balance too of balancing that. I almost felt like I was more busy sometimes when my son was younger and I was home working part-time and taking care of everything. I thought it was actually easier to go back to work full-time because I could take away some of those responsibilities that I had. So it's an interesting time just to, it's different for every individual in every circumstance. So I just think that it's something that as you go through, you'll get to figure out what's right for you. And then just to kind of question yourself when you start hearing some of those inner voices that are not maybe helpful.
Can I piggyback on that inner voice that's not helpful? I paused before Eli because yes, it has been a while, but also because I was in a very different circumstance. I had a very specific belief ever since I was little when I was going to have children. I had a number, I'd heard it somewhere, and that number was it. That made sense, except for the fact that it wasn't my life. And when I saw the number that I had and saw women at that age, I thought, oh no, this is all wrong. So my first step was to let that go. Like, that's just something I've been holding on to. And I have to ask myself, does that fit me here? And the second thing I did was then ask my boss. I was working in a school. I was an assistant. I went on in my journey to actually become a director at that school. But at that time I said, what's the parenting policy? Like, what is the benefit here for being having a child in the school? What's the possibility? Got my answer and was like, great, I'm staying. So I crafted my coming years and that was 4 years before my son was born. Like, I was planning ahead, and no, not everybody can do that. But it really started with me stopping and identifying, like, what was this thing that I was holding on to? So that's something that I definitely look forward to and love doing when I work with clients, and when we are together as colleagues, even, is looking at, like, how is it that you hone in on those voices and then begin to shift based on the reality and really what's best in the situation.
Oh man, that's some really strategic planning, and a really difficult thing to do when you have a structured plan in mind. There's this saying that says, "Man plans, God laughs," and it's becoming truer and truer as we navigate through life and we see all the things that go awry. I suppose. Does anyone have a story of something that may have gone awry comparatively, like against your plans? Whether it's like within your career and then also in your parenting journey, maybe they overlapped a little bit. Kind of going off of the off of the path here, but I'm just like, just curious if there's a story that comes to mind based off of the topic that we're at.
I have one, if you don't mind.
Sure.
My jumping in. Okay. So I said I lived abroad with my two kids, and They were 7 and 9 at the time, and we were living abroad. And I remember one time saying to the girls, like, "Oh, well, when we decided," and my 7-year-old interrupted me and she said, "Oh, we didn't decide to live abroad. You and Daddy decided to live abroad." And I went, "Ooh, okay." And then we were talking about it, and I said, this is going to look a lot better in the rearview mirror than it is right now in this moment. And we've talked about that a lot since then, because now that she's 17 and she's fluent in a foreign language and feels really comfortable navigating the world as kind of a global citizen, having lived in another culture, she's so grateful for it. But and it was so shocking to me as well, because I was like, "Oh, look at this great thing I'm doing for my kids. I'm giving them this experience." And having to realize that they had their own individual experiences with the choices that we were making as parents, and creating the space for them to have those experiences, even when those experiences were in opposition to the intention of what we how the intention of what we had planned. So Eli, you're exactly right. Man makes plans and God laughs.
It's just so tough to know, because you have lived experience. You're a parent. You've gone through it. You think you're doing the best thing, and in that moment, it's interesting how we forget our own journey sometimes, and how we would have felt if our parents made those decisions for us, and it pulled us away maybe from our friends or whatever else comes up in those moments. So it's really interesting, and I always struggle with this when I hopefully become a parent. How can I reconnect with that aspect of maybe my inner child and my childlike experience, so that way I can maybe empathize a little bit more with my young person, um, as I go through all this, or like maybe I feel like I need to spend all this time at work, but like no, I would have been nice to have more time with my father, but he did what he had to do for our family to to work and provide, and it's like I'd like to maybe do it differently, right? So yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, any hacks there on ways that you might be able to reconnect with your younger self, to be able to empathize a bit more with your children? Have any of you? I mean, it's tough when your kids are under like a year or two, just about, because we can't remember really those periods. But we'll get to everybody here in one more question after this. But I'm just curious if anyone has any hacks on connecting. To that part of you, so that way you can empathize a bit more.
So I'll just jump in real quickly to say that it has been surprisingly, from my experiences, that has really happened kind of naturally for me. That having a child going through, even though I don't remember what was going on when I was a year and a half, but that I have really had some joy in reconnecting with some of the memories of my childhood, and by seeing Sophia grow, and by seeing her learn things, and then being able to think about what it's like to be exploring things for the first time. That like beginner's mind is all there for a 1.5-year-old, and that I guess maybe it has been intentional to stop and have time for that. But if I give myself that time to not be running around and just get down at her level, that it is something that has happened reasonably easily for me. And so I don't know if other moms have experienced that same.
I can echo that absolutely. Slow it down was going to be my hack. I can remember, I mean, I'm in New York, so anything that has to do with children is like the Olympics, right? Like we've got to get into preschool. We've got to get to preschool. We've got to, and I just remember one day being in the, like, put your shoes and socks on, and it was like all these things that had to happen. And then it just dawned on me one day, like, what if the putting the shoes and the socks on is the thing? Like, what if that's the event? And it just slowed down everything. And suddenly I'm walking out of the door with a happy child, because we just made an activity out of putting on shoes and socks, which did require, I had to make more time, but then the going to school was happening very quickly because these were little happy feet going, as opposed to my like, get out the door face. I don't make that face anymore, ever. But I think there's a lot of opportunity, right? And there's option, but we won't see it if we don't find the places where we can really just slow down.
That's super powerful. Slowing down, being present in those moments. Yeah, I'll take that advice. So I just want to talk to the audience real quick and just say we're going to come to our last official, documented question here for our panelists. So before we do that, if you do have a question that's been burning up, something that's come to mind, something you're navigating personally right now, and you'd like a bit of insight on maybe how our panelists have dealt with a similar challenge, please go ahead and include that question in the comments, so that way we'll have it ready to tee up and queue up for the Q&A portion of this presentation or this panel discussion. So with that being said, I would like each of the panelists to weigh in here on if you could go back and give yourself one piece of advice that you now know on motherhood and career management and that intersection of both. What advice would you give yourself? Would you like me to pick and then go around, or? All right, I'll just do that. Rainbow, how about you go, unless you don't feel ready, and then you can pass.
I'm ready.
Okay.
I came up with this today because I just returned to work after my second half of my maternity leave, and I'm finally feeling like myself again in terms of productivity. So my advice is to accept the productivity and that time management is going to be out of your control for, I hope it's just the first 8 months, because today feels like the day I'm back to normal, but who knows? And I would say really verbalize your journey and your relationship with your own career, because I've struggled with telling my parents-in-law that I still want to have a career, while even though I have an 8-month-old. And by verbalizing that, we're working together to figure out the best childcare and for me to get the most support I can so that I could still be, a happy mom. So yeah, I think I'll end with that.
Asking for what you need and what you want is so important. No one's going to know, right? And then we're just going to have these assumptions just out there, and we'll be dissatisfied because no one's a mind reader, right? So I think that's really important. And building up the courage and learning how to have those conversations. Was it a safe space, Rainbow, for you to have those conversations? Did it feel safe, or did you feel like you were walking on eggshells having that conversation?
It definitely felt safe. I think I've also learned to understand my parents-in-law's personalities well before this. And so, I'm not necessarily going to tell them that I'm not super happy with my job, and that I learned to pick and choose what I want to share. But it definitely feels like a safe space because I have a husband who's very supportive, and he knows that I would not be happy just to be a stay-at-home mom, maybe at this point. But and we've also talked about options of part-time versus full-time, or being a consultant, figuring out a way to for us to really maximize our time, but still have time to take care of our baby.
One more thing, you mentioned you split up the second half of your maternity leave, and I had kind of heard about being able to break this up, but this might be a new thing for a lot of people. Would you mind sharing a little bit more about how that works?
Sure. Well, the reason I split up my maternity leave is a lot more logistical. It was because I started my job with PGE in August, and I needed to be with the company for a year before I could take the full tenure of the maternity leave. But it really was a blessing in disguise because So I took the first 3 months of maternity leave and had to wait until August comes around again before I could take the remaining um, month of maternity leave. And I found that to be really helpful. One, because I was getting married, so just needed the time to focus on planning. But it's also really helpful to kind of get that reset, unofficial reset as a parent, as an employee. So I think that's something you can ask for, and I also think that companies are probably going to be more welcoming of this approach because then they know that you're coming back. But yeah.
Cool. That's super helpful. All right, Satya, can I ask you if you could go back and give yourself a piece of advice that you know now on motherhood and the intersection of careers? What would
Yeah.
you tell yourself?
Yeah, I think I would take more risks and just experiment more because I feel like when I have done that more recently, I've learned new things about myself, like what my interests are or what my interests are not. And it's been really helpful to kind of like help maybe create like uh, almost like a map towards like where I might want to go next. And so for example, like I was curious about UX design last year, so I decided to just like take a class on it and really liked it up to a point. And then there was a point where I was like, nope, this is not for me anymore. But I did like some pieces of it that actually is very helpful in my current job. I also like decided to like start writing online and started writing regularly on LinkedIn. Like I was writing once a week just to kind of practice a skill and see if I can actually do it. And then at some point I somehow went viral and hit like 4 million viewers with just one post that I wrote in 5 minutes. And that was like so cool. And so like, I was like, oh, this is interesting. I really like this. And I also started writing a blog based on just like enjoying the writing practice. So I write a monthly blog called Satya Creates. And so I'd say that's a big thing I wish I would have done earlier in my career and earlier in my life. And even as a mom to a young kid, I think those are things I could have done during that time. And I didn't do as much of that. And so that's something I would tell myself to do more of.
Oh, that is so cool. The trial and error and like the courage required to take these risks. And honestly, like give yourself permission to say, yeah, I tried it. I don't need to do it. Right. It's like you bake a cake and it doesn't taste good and you feel like you have to eat the thing because you paid for the ingredients. Just like just throw it away. You know, it's okay. It's okay. It's not a good cake. Um, no, that's and I read Satya's blog. It's exceptional. It's vulnerable. It's open. So if you could check out Satya Creates, it's a really well done blog. Super powerful stuff. Let's see. Sharon. Okay. Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, and piggybacking on what Satya said, and yeah, Satya Creates is awesome. Your 4 million new friends, click. So I would tell myself that nothing is permanent. And know what I don't think we've broached the subject, but I'll share that I had postpartum that was really bad. And on top of that, I knew something was off, but then I felt like betrayed by my own biology. Like, what sense does this make? I've been given this tiny, tiny creature and I can't like literally regulate like my emotions, and know kind of like where my compass is. But what really helped me was, as I said, I was director at a preschool, and Maria Montessori, her philosophy is that we're working with children for the people that they will become. And I would literally picture my son as what I would have, at that moment, I thought he would look like at 21, telling me it's okay. If I'm crying, it's okay. If I'm screaming, it's okay. Here's what the goal is. But what I had to remind myself of, and what I relied on others to help me, was to remember that nothing was permanent. Like with a baby, something lasts for like 6 weeks and then you don't need it again, or like a 2-year-old's only 2 for a little bit. It does. Okay. It's like 2 years, but it does stop. Right. And within that, then I gave myself permission to be creative. I was like, oh, okay, this isn't going to last forever. So what can I do about this now? Like, what are the parts and pieces that I can play with? How can I make this work? So when you're asking about hacks, those were the hacks. Like, where are the movable pieces and what's the options? Because this isn't going to be forever. And I saw a question there in the chat. What really helped me as far as going back to work was having people who understood. And I worked in a preschool, so people were very familiar with pregnant women, but having them understand that maybe that didn't come out of my mouth the way it should have, or maybe I needed more of a break, or maybe I did need to go get sick in the bushes. Yeah, that is the advice I would have given myself. And I felt very lucky that I was surrounded by people who got that.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing so openly. Eva, may I ask you on a piece of advice you'd give yourself?
Yeah, first of all these pieces of advice are great, and I wish you would have told me them when I was had a 3-month-old. But the piece of advice, but I will still work with them all going forward. They're still relevant. The piece of advice that okay, I will. The piece of advice that I would give myself and do give myself regularly at this juncture is embrace the mess. So I like things to be kind of planned out. I would love to know how things are going to turn out, feel like I'm capable of achieving or getting all my to-do list items done. All of the things that I felt like I was capable of doing prior to becoming a parent. And now I'm regularly just thinking, okay, I don't exactly know how I'm going to do all this, but I'm going to figure it out. I'm just going to take it one chunk at a time. And it does feel very messy at times. So I have really tried to just embrace that, but it was somewhat difficult to learn that from going from a more structured, being in more control of my schedule, and then having a little one who is now in control of most of the things.
Embrace the mess. I love that. Beanie.
Okay, I'm like taking notes on everything you all are saying because this is amazing. Even though they're 19, my kids are 19 and 17, I'm still here to learn. So when you posed this question, I remembered saying something to a friend when my kids were really little and I was working full time, and my husband at the time was working out of state 5 days a week, and it was just intense. And I said to her, I said, I'm just trying to keep all the spinning plates aloft. And I had this image of this woman holding all these. And she said, oh, honey, she's like, just get comfortable with the sound of them crashing to the floor. And I loved that because it really reframed, instead of trying to juggle, just understand you're not going to have all the plates in the air. And what I like about that is I always tell my kids, you get to write this story. This is your story to write. And one of the things I think about in that is choosing your language. What I'm loving hearing from the panelists here is all this different language and narrative around the story. So the one piece of advice that I take from that is that instead of looking for work-life balance, which is a zero-sum game, invite yourself to come up with your own language. For me, it's work-life harmony, right? Because then somebody can hit a wrong note. It's like, oh, okay, we're out of tune. And I just worked with a client who said that she really focuses on fitness, friends, and family. And so for her, those are the things that she wants to keep in harmony. And so just thinking about what is important for you in writing your story, in keeping your life, whether it's in harmony or in some other sense, writing your own story about this work-life situation.
That's cool. I like reframing work-life balance in your own words because it's so used, right? But it means, yeah, I don't know. It's just so stringent. It's a difficult to achieve, right? So how can you make it more achievable? Thank you all so much. We do have a few questions here that I'm going to put up, and whoever feels like tackling them, I'll just leave you to it. You could just unmute and go for it. So Christy says she's applying for jobs after a 6-year gap as a stay-at-home mom. How much information about this should I share in interviews?
I don't necessarily want to answer this. I just want to say that we all had the same face with that. We went, oh yeah, that's a big question. So Christy, thank you for asking that question.
Can I chime in with a piece of advice I got from someone that I just keep using? When people ask me, so what do you do? Which was my huge shock. I was like, well, I don't have a title. Like, I've been at home. I don't, they said, when people ask me what I do, I say, when. That just put it into perspective. Like, when are you talking about when do I do what I do? What I evolved to in sharing about what I did is I found myself sharing more and more. And I tied it back into how that made me the best candidate for what was in the job description, or what is the mission of the company, or what are the values of the company? How does that fit with the product? And I found myself with a lot of freedom of being like, oh, everything I did, right? Diversity committee, PTA, whatever it was, bake sale, like I could find a way to connect because what was I doing? I wasn't getting paid, as Beanie has mentioned a couple of times, right? I wasn't getting paid. I was still working. I was still using logistics, all my skills, everything in my tool belt. So I would say, ask yourself, when do you do what you do? And how do you tie that into what you do, what you want to do, and where you want to do it?
When? Oh, that's so good. Who else wants to? Anyone else have anything they'd like to add here for Christy's question?
This is more brainstorming because I haven't had this experience of explaining a job gap yet, but I feel like it could happen soon. I think maybe just kind of giving yourself the title of being a CEO of the household. You are a conflict manager, you are a COO, you operate the house so that it runs smoothly. And I think you should really give yourself credit for the skills that you've built and continue to build as being a stay-at-home mom, because it's more than a full-time job.
Couldn't agree more. It is totally operations. I just remember my mother like taking my father's job and basically doubling his earnings through the way she shopped, the way she focused on coupon clipping, going to like 5 different stores to get all the things that we needed for the week, and then managing the budgets and paying the bills and taking us here, there, and everywhere, and managing those logistics and staying on top of it. Like the emotional challenges of dealing with young people who are just screaming and bothering each other and poking, and it's wild. It's like no other workplace. You know what I mean? It's the most intense workplace half the time. So it is. It is such an empowering position to be in as a mother. And it's unfortunate that society tends to not see it in that way traditionally, but I think it's coming around. But it really starts with us and our confidence in talking about it in that way. So I love it.
And can I jump in there, Eli? Because I think it is really important to manage expectations, because while you are right, and like LinkedIn now has like something that you can put on your LinkedIn for like career pause, or there's a bunch of different options. I think it's also managing the expectations that, sometimes you're going to come up against a hiring manager who literally doesn't understand the value of the time that you spent. I in my job searches, I've had my star stories around like the DEI initiatives that I worked on at my kids' elementary school that have had an impact for the last decade. And but I had somebody say, okay, that's great, but what did you do while you were working? I had somebody just say to me in a very recent job search that I was too ambitious, and that I was, I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And I was thinking, well, yes, that's true. And so just understanding that to manage the expectations that the world is still there. There are definitely still some people who don't find this space valuable, and this work history valuable, and finding the people who do, and finding the companies that do, and the companies that live their values, and the spaces like this where people can speak their truth about this lived experience and the value that this lived experience has in the workplace.
Getting chills. Heck yes. We get to decide what we want. we don't have to settle for someone who's questioning us, saying we're too much of whatever, right? And it's really important, if you are in transition right now, to remember that you get the final say on where you end up. You get the final say. If it's not sitting well with you, you don't have to say yes. Okay, you have to please someone who is being a jerk. There's one question here. Thank you so much for sharing with us. Question is, what can corporate leaders do to create a safe space and encourage the readjustment of moms returning from maternity leave? But let me turn this around a little bit and say, what do you all want leaders to know about how they need to show up to create a space for you at work? Like, what is something that you want them to hear? And you could take it either way, Marcio's question, or that the direction I took it, because it's a great, like, if we have it here, we can then use that language in the future, maybe even share it with leaders, right? So.
I think it's through modeling, honestly. Like, it's like modeling the behavior, like whether it's you or like the people that are on your leadership team or the employees at your company. What I noticed in my current company, there's a lot of modeling of putting up your boundaries, of like marking your calendar when you are like taking a yoga class, or you are like away, you're taking a break in the middle of the day to do whatever parenting, PTA meeting, parenting duty you have to do, or if you're, using your mornings for personal things. So like, as long as I think the company's all about like, just communicate that you are busy, like mark your calendar, I'm not available during this time. And there's flexibility. So I think flexibility is important. I'll say the remote culture did not exist when I went out of the workforce, the full-time workforce. I was kind of almost forced to, because I could not find full-time work where there was a remote possibility. But nowadays there are. So like really making sure that remote culture is family friendly, and people are not working like 24/7, that there is like, this culture of like take time off in the night, spend time with your family, time off on the weekends, taking vacation, like if you have unlimited vacation, making sure that you actually make your employees take time off. Our company actually closes down the entire company for 2 weeks during the whole year, during like middle of the year and then at the end of the year. And we are encouraged to take a certain number of weeks of vacation, even though we have a limited vacation. So it's like really like making sure everyone does that. You see your manager doing that. You see your colleagues doing that. So things like that, I think it's like creating that culture of that safe space. It starts from leadership, obviously.
Sounds like a great environment you landed in, and it's awesome to see that, the modeling approach here. So leaders, if you're listening, model that behavior. Anyone else?
So I'll jump in but first of all, agree with everything Satya said. Absolutely. Two like very specific things that I wish I would have had a little bit more support on when I returned. For moms who are choosing to return to work but still breastfeed, make them a comfortable spot. Like really just make it easy for them. Don't make them have to have some weird, uncomfortable conversations with folks that they don't want to talk to about what they're doing in the conference room or wherever they're going. Just try it. Please make it easy for folks. It's hard to do, and it's even harder when you got to jump through hoops to like figure out how you get to do that at work. So that's my, just like firm takeaway. And then I don't know if anyone else experienced this, but like when I was home, I was so focused on taking care of the baby, and and my brain was like also very tired because I wasn't sleeping, and so I was really worried about my performance when I returned. And it would have just been great to have a manager that was trained to say like, hey, you're doing a great job, like I'm glad you're back, you're doing great, and just be a little bit of a cheerleader, because there's, I think I can't remember exactly, it might have been Satya that mentioned like there's guilt for not working, but there's guilt for working. Like moms, you're just gonna feel guilty. It's gotta work through it. So I was like, well, I'm not sure if I'm doing well, and I'm leaving my child, there's like 10 weeks old, like at this place. And so I think the more you can cheerlead those moms in the first couple of weeks or couple of months when they get back, just to keep them feeling good about all of the things they're trying to manage, that would be my takeaway.
I love that. That's so good. I'm getting, everyone's speaking. I'm just getting chills. It's wonderful. We're a little bit over time. We've gone 5 minutes over. I know everyone has schedules here. So, um, is there anything else anyone feels compelled to say at this stage, or should we wrap it up? If it's right here, just say it. Just gonna put it out there. 6 seconds. That is the amount of time anyone, like a human being, like can handle silence before it starts feeling fairly awkward. So, yeah, I don't know. It's a statistic or a fact in public speaking when you're leading a presentation. But um, I just want to thank you all for joining tonight, taking time out of your busy schedules to be here to share your stories of motherhood and careers, to share this advice and these tips and these learnings and this vulnerable, the vulnerable aspects that you've navigated personally. And hopefully many of our audience members had plenty of takeaways, things that they could use, apply, lots of strategies learned. And anyone listening who manages or supports or are team members to mothers returning to work or mothers going on maternity leave, they have some takeaways and maybe can step into the shoes a little bit, especially, I'll speak as a man. I'm not going to pretend to even understand what that journey is like. But thank you so much for opening up the doors to that understanding a little bit more through this conversation. This was a lot of fun, and I really, really enjoyed having you all here. So thank you all so much. This has been recorded, so you can view it on YouTube. You can view it on LinkedIn. There will be a replay whenever you want it. Share it with others who you feel that this might resonate with. And if you are a mom in transition, talk to us over at Your Career Strategy. We have wonderful coaches like Sharon, who works with us here. And I know Beanie also is a great coach of parents. So we are happy to help and just hold space to hear you out and help you navigate through these experiences. So thank you all so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, Eli.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful night.